The question is, should NASCAR allow the teams to change the brake pads before the race? Is that the question?
Correct.
Of course they should.
So they did acknowledge that they were willing to make up a rule.
Denny Hamlin says NASCAR threatened to make up a penalty. NASCAR says it never needed to make anything up. Both statements describe the same conversation inside the same hauler at Iowa Speedway roughly 24 hours before the Iowa Corn 350. The gap between those two accounts is not a small one, and it arrives with 3 races left before the chase, with the championship leader publicly saying he did not trust the brakes underneath him for the entire race distance. Denny Hamlin arrived in Newton, Iowa as the NASCAR Cup Series points leader, holding an 84-point advantage over second-place Tyler Reddick. That position was secure. His record at the racetrack was not. Iowa Speedway measures 0, 875 miles, and in his 2 previous starts there, in 2024 and 2025, Denny Hamlin finished 24th both times. He arrived without a single top 10 finish at the venue. That history shaped the decision his team made before the weekend began. Rather than continue with a package that had produced nothing at Iowa Speedway, Denny Hamlin asked his team to borrow from 2311 Racing, the organization he co-owns, which had run well at the track. "We tried to run something a little bit different, not unknown," Hamlin said on his podcast. "Other teams have run it quite a bit before. I wanted to lean a little bit on 2311. They had been pretty strong at this track over the last year or so." He explained the reasoning further. "I kind of wanted to lean on their setups a little bit more this time around since I hadn't had success at this racetrack quite yet. I hadn't found what that good feel is around here yet. So, I needed to put someone's setup that has run well and then let me learn from there. This was not an experiment ahead of the postseason." By Hamlin's own count, the package had been running combination roughly 20 races across various cars that he was aware of. He also took ownership of the call. "My message to my team, and I'll take the responsibility for it, is that I can't hit my ass with both hands at this racetrack. Put in somebody's setup that's been pretty good." Then Saturday practice started. Within 3 laps, the brake pedal in the number 11 Toyota went to the floor. At a short oval like Iowa Speedway, brakes are how a driver settles the car and gets it to rotate through the corner. Without consistent pressure, corner entry becomes guesswork. Crew Chief Chris Gale recognized immediately that the problem could end their race before it started. Denny Hamlin still ran qualifying on those same pads, and they behaved exactly as they had in practice, functional for a handful of laps, then gone. Sources have reported his qualifying result as both 29th and 32nd, placing him around 30th on the grid. The team reached a conclusion about the cause. "I am pretty confident." The team, I believe, is pretty confident that it was a bad batch of actual brake pads. "We believe the pads to be the issue simply because everything else is the same for all the other cars." Denny Hamlin was not the only driver affected. Chase Briscoe, his teammate at Joe Gibbs Racing, developed the same symptoms in the number 19 car, and crew chief James Small reached the same conclusion. On Sunday morning, Small described the condition of his driver's brake pads in one word: destroyed. Riley Herbst at 2311 Racing, working with crew chief Davin Restivo, had the same problem. Bubba Wallace and the number 23 team also spent well into the morning garage hours making adjustments. Those 4 cars spent the morning attempting fixes. Teams were permitted to drain their brake lines, a process known as bleeding, without penalty, and they were allowed to change rotors that had cracked. Both the number 11 and number 35 teams made that change. One detail from the garage explains a great deal, and it received almost no attention. Legacy Motor Club, the other Tier 1 Toyota organization, had no brake issues at all. Car Chief Austin Pollock of the number 43 team gave the reason before the race JGR and 2311 run a different package than we do. On Sunday morning, Chris Gale and the number 11 team changed the brake cooling ducts on the car. NASCAR ruled that an unapproved adjustment and the penalty was a drop to the rear of the field. Gale described the change as a 50-50 proposition, an even chance it would be enough to get Denny Hamlin to the finish. Because of where he had already qualified, the penalty was close to a moot point. Denny Hamlin would start 35th. Before the race, Denny Hamlin went to the NASCAR hauler. What happened inside that hauler is the center of this entire story, and to understand it, the rule itself has to be explained clearly, because most coverage skip the mechanics. NASCAR single sources several braking components. The calipers, the brake lines, and the master cylinders are all mandated parts supplied through NASCAR. Because NASCAR supplies them, NASCAR accepts responsibility if one is defective, and a team is allowed to replace it. Rotors can be changed when cracked. Lines can be bled. All of that is legal and carries no penalty because NASCAR treats it as a safety matter. Brake pads are different. Pads are not a single source part. Each team buys whatever pad it chooses, and drivers prefer a wide range of pads depending on the track and their driving style. Because the team makes the choice, NASCAR classifies the pad as part of the car setup rather than a supplied component. Iowa Speedway was an impound race. Once technical inspection closes at an impound event, setup is frozen. Pads can only be changed after the green flag falls behind the wall, which costs an enormous amount of track position. Denny Hamlin laid out the trap in his own words. "We got in a situation, apparently. I knew that NASCAR typically lets you change your braking components when it comes to safety, because NASCAR doesn't want you having brake issues. They don't want people failing brakes, blowing rotors." He continued, "Next thing you know, a rotor goes across the fence, hits somebody. It's happened this year. So nobody wants that." But what's interesting is that the pads are the only things the teams are not allowed to change overnight. Then came the line that defines the situation. Not even with a penalty, you can't just go to the back and change it. That is the box. Every other brake component had an exit. The one part Denny Hamlin believed was defective had none, at any price. He explained NASCAR's logic as he understood it. The calipers, the brake lines, master cylinders, all that stuff. That's a mandated part by NASCAR. They're saying since we single source that, if it's defective, then that's on us and we'll let you change it. But if it's the pads, that's something that you choose. So Denny Hamlin made an offer. Not a request for an exemption, an offer to accept punishment. I told them I'd start on pit lane. Just let me get out of this box. We have a major problem. And they were like, that's not the way it's written right now. He acknowledged the rule was against him and argued for judgment instead. And I said, I know that. However, this is where common sense has to come into play, that this is not for some strategic advantage. This is to hopefully keep my car from blowing a rotor or going into a corner dead straight and wiping someone or myself head on into the wall. His request was for a single addition to the rulebook. So that's where I wish there was an asterisk at the bottom and saying, but we will use common sense. He then escalated the offer, volunteering a penalty that would carry into the following week at Richmond Raceway. I'll start on pit lane this week. I'll start last next week. That's enough to where you ain't going to be screwing around. No one wants to take that penalty. NASCAR did not relent, and Denny Hamlin understood the reasoning behind the refusal. And that's their argument, right? We do not want 36 teams having a qualifying brake pad and a race brake pad. At that point, he tested the limit of the rule directly, asking what would happen if he simply refused to get into the car. What if I just tell the team, nope, I will not go on the racetrack with those brake pads? Absolutely not. I'm too old to be hitting this wall head on. The answer he received is the reason this story spread. They said, well, we would make up a penalty, and it would be worse than what it would be if you just came in and changed them under green. Denny Hamlin's reply was that he would simply drive slowly and finish however many laps down he ended up. His summary of the exchange, so they did acknowledge that they were willing to make up a rule. He got in the car. His state of mind going into the race was unlike anything in his career. This was the worst mindset I've ever had going into a race. I never felt beat before a race started, and I thought I was done today. He lowered his own target accordingly. I switched my goals to needing some cars to wreck, and maybe I get a top 25. The brake pressure was erratic across 350 laps. After cautions, when everything cooled down, he had something to work with. During long green flag runs, he was operating with roughly 10% brake pressure. His description afterward was direct. Just had to white-knuckle every lap. Obviously not knowing where my car was going to land when I got into the corner. Chase Briscoe experienced the same failure on a delay. Honestly, the first stage I had zero issues, and I was amazed that I didn't because I was expecting it. And then, in the middle of the second stage, I went into the corner and all of a sudden my pedal went to the floor just like yesterday. The pattern repeated for the rest of the afternoon. I would have a restart and it would be good for 5 or 6 laps, then right back to the floor. Denny Hamlin finished 5th. Chase Briscoe finished 6th. It was Denny Hamlin's first career top 10 at Iowa Speedway and his 13th top 5 of the season. Team owner Joe Gibbs described his driver's condition afterward. "I want to say this, I've never seen Denny that exhausted. He got out of that car, and he was sitting there on the pit wall." Gibbs added, "I think he drove his heart out." Then came the line that became the headline everywhere. "I'd retire at the end of the year if I had to do that every week, that's for sure." That was a joke, and the context matters. Denny Hamlin is retiring. His contract with Joe Gibbs Racing runs through 2027, and Brent Cruz is the confirmed successor in the number 11 car. At 45, he is the oldest full-time driver in the NASCAR Cup Series. His assessment of the day itself was the opposite of regret. The team did an amazing job. I would take that day 100 out of 100 times. NASCAR has since responded, and this is the part that did not exist on Sunday. Mike Forde, Vice President of Racing Communications, addressed the claim on Hauler Talk. He pushed back on the framing rather than the facts. By creating a new penalty, that's one way of looking at it if you want. The other way of looking at it is, we have discretionary penalties in our toolbox. And that's what we were referring to. The trigger, according to Forde, would have been disobeying a NASCAR directive language that already exists in the rulebook. Once that applies, the penalty becomes discretionary. So, is that a 3-lap penalty, a 5-lap penalty, a 20-lap penalty, whatever it is? So, we wouldn't be creating one, but we would be using our discretion. Both accounts can be true at once. Denny Hamlin heard that NASCAR would make up a penalty. NASCAR maintains it would have applied existing discretion. Whether that is a meaningful distinction or a change of wording is left open. Forde also revealed a hypothetical he raised during Monday's debrief meeting, asking officials how angry the garage would have been on a scale of 1 to 10. If NASCAR had allowed the number 11 to change pads. Brad Moran turns to me and goes, 10. And then Brian Goebel, our chief inspector, said 11. Forde noted that Denny Hamlin presented his case fairly, that both Hamlin and Joe Gibbs used the open door policy, and that finishing 5th likely helped. He also left the door open. "I do think that there's further discussion to be had when we encounter something like this again, but how we ruled is how we have ruled in the past." The standings shifted significantly. Denny Hamlin left Iowa Speedway with a 103-point lead over new second-place driver Ty Gibbs, who won the race for his second victory of 2026. Tyler Reddick got loose in Turn 1 on lap 4 and collected Eric Jones, ending both days. Reddick finished 36th and dropped from 2nd to 4th, now 120 points back. His own assessment was blunt. It's the type of stuff you don't do to yourself and you don't do to a teammate. Ryan Blaney sits 3rd in points after leading a race-high 129 laps and finishing 3rd. Christopher Bell finished 2nd for the 7th time this season and the 4th time in 5 races, calling it a bad second-place finish for sure. Eric Jones fell to 20th, 50 points below the cut line with 3 races remaining. The lead carries real weight. The regular season champion begins the 10-race chase with a 25-point advantage. Next is Richmond Raceway on August 15th in Denny Hamlin's home state of Virginia, where he has won 5 times. A strong result there could effectively lock the top seed, which returns to the question the weekend produced. The points leader of the NASCAR Cup Series stated publicly that he did not trust his brakes for 350 laps. And the rule that trapped him is unchanged heading into the postseason. One position holds that a safety exception should exist with a heavy penalty attached, as Denny Hamlin proposed. The other holds that the moment safety becomes an exit from impound rules, every team will find a safety reason. Mike Forde said further discussion is coming. Richmond Raceway on September 4th, and the chase are the deadline.